Welcome to this session. I guess I'll go in full-on present mode here. All right, so welcome to this session. We're going to talk about how you go from spreadsheets to Airtables to custom apps. I am Devin Balkind. I build software for startups, nonprofits, and government agencies. I'm like a software producer. I don't code, but I do structure data, and I make specifications that people do code, which I consider to be like a production kind of skill. I also train people how to make the software development process legible and easy to do in kind of collaboration with your team. And I think these DIY database tools, also known as Spreadbases, things like Airtable, et cetera, are an exceptionally useful tool for this process. Because basically I like DIY databases. People are saying Spreadbases, so I'll go with Spreadbases. Things like Airtable are doing for data what content management systems like WordPress did for publishing, which is like radically democratizing access, and that is that's an amazing thing. Apparently, I need to be okay. We're admitting more people. Great. Okay, so I kind of do this work as a professional, but also in a volunteer capacity with Serapis, which is, some of you might be aware, is the 2,000-plus-year-old Greek god of information management. The Great Library of Alexandria, was dedicated to him or her because Serapis takes on culturally appropriate characteristics to build trust with populations and then uses that trust to nudge people to adopt open data standards and freely share information. So a great god for open source, in my opinion. And this session here is part of the WeGov NYC program, which is a project of Serapis to bring New Yorkers together to create the world's best municipality. We've been around for, the program's inched its way along for a year or two. We've got some new tools like the data book and our normalized data API, which we have a session about on Thursday, which is cool and might be helpful for folks, on the Zoom. We do a little project funding for tools that demonstrate innovative uses of technology for the city. And we're slowly putting together a community newsletter. We're going to do some events when this whole COVID thing has passed, et cetera. So our plan today is I'm basically going to talk about DIY databases, aka Spreadbases. We're going to do a quick Airtable training. Then we're going to talk about how you start with a spreadsheet, turn it into an Airtable, and then at least the process that I use to turn that Airtable into apps. And then if we have time, I'll rant a bit about how this is a path to reforming government. At any point, if you have comments or something, throw them in the chat. I'd appreciate it. It makes me know that people here are, like, I don't know, paying attention, have stuff to say. I'd like to be as responsive as possible. And if folks have questions, thanks, MTJ, who said hi on the chat. If folks have questions, then put them in the chat, and I will try to follow along. Yes. Okay. So here we go. So I'm going to talk about DIY databases briefly. Spreadsheets. So pardon the change in whatever. Here we go. So spreadsheets are designed for people. Everyone here probably knows what a spreadsheet is, uses spreadsheets often. I did some analysis on people's responses. Like we're about 50% spreadsheet creators, maybe 25% people with Airtable experience. So yeah, spreadsheets are designed for people. Databases are designed for computers. On the left here, you can see what a database table looks like. It's aside from the field name, it's pretty, there's actually Latin in it. You know, you can see on the right, you can see a diagram of like how databases connect together to get you the experience that you need. Yes, the meeting is being recorded and it will be shared to the people who have registered. The registration link for this event is at the top of the chat log. Okay, so spreadsheets are for people, databases are for computers. DIY databases, Spreadbases, have the ease of a spreadsheet, the utility of a database, and usually the good ones have the power of an API. API is an application program interface. It allows computers to navigate each other's data. So there are a few options for these spread-based style systems. I think Airtable is the best. Why? It's got the simplest spreadsheet style interface that makes it as comfortable as possible for people who are coming here from Google Sheets or Excel. It has a great API that auto-generates API docs, so it's really easy for developers to start using the data like immediately. That's meant, the data within the Airtable. It's got a useful free tier, and they offer nonprofit discounts. They have a lot of integrations with Zapier and Integromat. There are a few open source knockoffs that exist, but they're not very good yet. Give them a year or two. I'm quite excited about them being good. Okay, so I've done this presentation a few times, and rarely do I do the Airtable training up front, but I've learned that I should. It's never too early. So I'm gonna do this Airtable. I'm gonna kind of walk you through Airtable a little bit and try to do it quickly. If you want to follow along, there's an Airtable, and I'll pop this into the chat log. There's an Airtable here that you can view. You can also create your own Airtables, and like as I talk about stuff that I'm doing, you can do it yourself on your own Airtable. Whatever, it's all going to be pretty easy and clear. I'll quickly go through these slides, and then I'll just go into the Airtable. But yeah, basically, if you want Airtable training right now, that's get the most out of it. I would recommend signing up for Airtable. It takes a second. Hopefully you already did it. Airtable offers really 3 resources. They have a guide that kind of gives you the basics. They offer templates, and I think that's one of the best ways to understand Airtable is to use kind of click around existing templates. So you can go to airtable.com and see their templates and copy them and play around with those. They also have a thing called universes, or universe, where people can share Airtables with each other. Now the basic components of an Airtable are basically 5 kind of levels of an Airtable. What we an individual Airtable is called a base, which is basically a database, or a Google Sheet, it would be your Google Sheets file. It's the file. Then a base has numerous tables. Those tables can connect to each other, which gives it the database functionality that we know and love. Then that table contains fields, as you can imagine, right? These are the columns that you can define the data types of to structure database. So with tables and fields, you have you've got your data structure. Records are the rows to your fields. And so that's the content. And then views allow you to create different views, different collections, different ways to visualize the information within the database. You can filter and group. You can see different, you can apply a calendar view or a Kanban view or a gallery view, depending on what your data wants. Data types and records and collaboration and sharing. Data types and records all go through in a live database, in a live Airtable, but collaboration and sharing is useful because everything in Airtable you can download as a CSV, and it's a nicely formatted CSV that's easy to import into SQL or import into some other solution, which is great because it really reduces the lock-in. You can share any Airtable like it's a Google Doc by giving permissions to people at the various levels. And kind of the coolest part from a software development perspective is that it has an API with automatically generated documentation. And that allows you to use the Airtable as a database for an app. So basically you can just create a front end and use the Airtable as a database, and you don't need a database, your own database. Or you could use the API to sync the data into your own database, into like a SQL database, and then do interesting things from there. So hopefully everyone's following along. I'm just gonna go and play with an Airtable with you here. And if folks have questions about any of this stuff, please just like post them in the chat log, and I'll address them. Okay, so here is an Airtable I created using the COIB's enforcement fines data set. You can find this data set, let's see, I think it is right here. So this is a data set that is published by the Conflict of Interest boards about city employees who, have some fine against them for doing something that's a conflict of interest. This is public data. I don't think we have to worry about, right? It's public data. So to import data, you could create, when you're creating tables, you're basically just creating Airtable tables. So this is an Airtable. This is a new base. You can create a new base very easily, through the Airtable interface, airtable.com or whatever. So to import data, you basically have a few different options. You can create an empty table, which is just going to give you a basic table that you can build out. Building out really requires like right-clicking on the lines and then adding on the columns and adding fields, which is the experience of adding columns. You can also import data from a variety of different things. CSVs, you can paste data, you can paste CSV data in Excel. They even support Apple numbers, which I can't even, congratulations to them on that. And a few different things, including Trello. You can import Trello stuff, and you can actually kind of recreate Trello in here, and I can show you that quickly. But okay, so let's pretend like we just imported this cases file. Now we have this data here, and because we can do a few things with it. All right, each one of these columns is a data type. So the case number, which is our leftmost column, is our identifier, our unique identifier. And this came with the data. If this didn't come with the data, I'll just kind of start playing around. So let's say we wanted a case ID number that was from this data set. Okay, here's our case ID number. But then we also want to create our own UID for it. For the database, we could use an auto number field. So basically what I'm doing is I'm editing this case number field, and I'm going to call this the new ID field. And then I'm going to apply an auto number to it, which then gives just a sequential number that there's always going to be an auto number, a new one. There'll never be two of the same. So if I create a new field, the number comes up automatically. If I delete this field, and then create it again, it's going to give me 1122 and not 1121. So it remembers what the auto numbers are. So this is basically a way to do UID. For software developers on here, there's another way to get a UID, which is even more useful, which is to use the formula field and then use the record ID field. And this is the internal UID that Airtable assigns to this record. And that can be used if you're going to do like joins, SQL joins or something, move this into a different database. But basically, and this is also the language of the API. Like the API will return this to you even if it's not on the interface, on this graphical interface. So these record IDs are actually quite useful. But we'll go back to the auto number to keep things kind of user-friendly here. So okay, so we've got our ID field. So like I said, every column has its own data type. There are about 20-ish data types that range from barcodes and buttons, which are new, to created by, modified, by, last modified by. So these give you timestamps related to the record. You can also do formulas, kind of similar to spreadsheet formulas that can reference all, other tables. You can do counts and rollups. You can lookups. There are a bunch of features that allow you to pull data from other tables. And then there's kind of more of these interfacey features like ratings and duration, which allow you to kind of, we could say, okay, how serious was this infraction? Seriousness, we give that a rating field, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, we want to give that, let's give it a, we want to make the star red, so okay, red star field. So now we can start assigning seriousnesses as ratings, So that's kind of more of like an interactive element to make it easier for people to use the system. Currency and numbers and stuff like that, URLs. Email and phone are interesting, and I don't want to spend too much time on the Airtable training because I think a bunch of people already know about Airtable here. But basically, using fields like email and phone, Airtable has integrations with third-party apps. So like I sent an email to everybody who registered using the SendGrid email integration, which I can show you, but basically it looks for the email field. And so that email field allows me to send an email. By using the email field, that means I can send an email to this record. Same thing with the phone and text message. And using Airtable as a communication system to send mass emails and text messages is awesome and great and super useful. And I've used it in many projects, and it is a beloved feature. Collaborators are a method of kind of assigning records to people to whom I've shared the Airtable. And then there's single select and multi-select. Attachments allows you to attach files and images to records. And then the most important feature of all is link to another record, which I am going to show you right now. So here we are, we're looking at our cases file, we're enriching it, we're giving it our own IDs just in case we don't trust their case IDs. We're ranking the seriousness of these infractions. We're looking, we have this date field, which is cool. And this would allow us to say, okay, I want to see, I'm going to add a filter where the date is, let's see, these are 2019. Let's see, the date is, oh, I don't want is, I want is after, let's say we want to see things that are after 1/1/2020. So only 2020, all right, so we don't, nothing there. All right, only 2019 stuff, which actually cut down our records quite a bit. Okay, so now we have, so we can use the date field to do that level of filtering, right? Saying like, okay, it recognizes that this is a real date. You don't have to do like date math like you have to do in Excel to get that effect. And then now let's say, okay, so we have the case name and we have the agency. Right now, agency is a single select, which is a perfectly reasonable thing. But let's say we want to actually kind of pivot this into make this more of a database and give it the dimensionality we really want. Well, let's turn agency into a new table because we're going to start collecting some information about agencies. So the way we would do that is we'd say, okay, double click on agency and say, okay, instead of a single select, I want to link this to another record. And I want to create a new table called agency. I like agencies. I like making these things plural. And now what's going to happen is the colors changed because these are now records, linking to records on this table. So these are all of FDNYs. This is the filter is immaterial. These are all FDNYs. Enforcement fines, basically. And I can click on this ID, which is the ID of the enforcement fine, and it opens up the record as if it, as if I'm on that other database. And so that's kind of the dimensionality you get. This is where this becomes SQL-like in that you can, or Microsoft Access-like, where you can move between these data sets or these records, depending on what table you're on. And so if I then wanted to say, okay, I'm gonna start building out profile information for these agencies, maybe I wanna add their logos. You know, I'd create an attachment field, and then I can go and say, okay, let's find a logo for this. Here's a logo, you know, let's, what's the agency's phone number, main phone number. So phone number, you know, stuff like that. And so then you can start building out, basically just building the database out, going in that direction. Another thing that's interesting, and so, you know, I have Airtables with 20 or 30 different tables, deeply interconnected. You know, it's pretty easy to, sorry, I'm reading the chat log, which I'll get to. It's pretty easy to kind of build these things out into like giant monsters. And that requires some discipline to make sure that things don't go haywire. But like I said, this can't, I can't do too much of an Airtable training here because we just don't have the time. So let me just demonstrate what views can do. And then we can, I can address the questions and we can move it on. So if you have some questions you want to address, throw them into the chat right now. I'll go through them and then we'll get back to the presentation, more about the process of using this to turn into an app. But I will also say, okay, let's say that we wanted to also track case status in this context here. So I'm creating a field called status. Statuses need to be single select, you know, or generally single selects. So let's say it is, what are some good statuses for a case? Let's see, starting, under investigation. So maybe recommended would be before that. Recommended infraction or something like that. It's under investigation, decision made, whatever, fine, paid, or whatever. All right, so when it comes to status, now I could start assigning like, okay, this was someone recommended that this case come up. This one's under investigation. This one we've made a decision about. This one's also been recommended as a case to investigate. This one's resolved. Okay. Now, because of this, these statuses, down here you can see they're different views. So, like I said, I can't do a full Airtable training here because of time, but you know, views, you can filter things down for views. You can group things for views, but you can also create different types of views. And so there's a form view, which is what you use to register for this event here. And so by clicking the form view, it turns my fields all into like form fields that could be filled out. And then I could take this link and I could share it. And it would be like a public form. You fill out the public form and the data just flows into the Airtable, just like a kind of a Google form does. So here's the public form, blah, blah, blah. You know, you can change how the fields look, their labels, you know, or rearrange them, hide them, you know, for that form. Calendar uses dates. So because we have dates, it's asking, okay, which date field should we use? So it automatically found the date field. And so now we have a calendar of all of the infractions on a calendar. Which is kind of cool. So we can open up this record and see, okay, this is that infraction, this is that fine, or whatever that case. And I can, you know, move through the data to find, you know, kind of when the dates were for all this stuff. Gallery shows images and stuff. And Kanban's the one I wanted to just show off because I really don't like Trello. I like replacing Trello with Airtable. And so this is saying for this Kanban view, it's asking me to choose a field, choose a single select field. which is our status field. And so I chose status. And so now you can see I have these cards, and I can customize these cards to change the content therein. I can open a card and I can have a chat about a card, kind of like you can with Trello. And I can move them around to change their statuses. I can rearrange kind of the workflow around that. I can collapse things and do stuff like that. So, okay, so this is kind of just giving you an intro to like what views are, and they just released the Gantt view, which existed before as an add-on, which is exciting. I think the Gantt views are, Gantt views very useful. I can also create new statuses by just adding them up here and changing them there. And then if you go back here, you'll see that the statuses have changed. All right, so that's just a really quick rundown of views. Now I'll go through questions, and then we'll move on into like later phase of the presentation, unless people really want me to do something else, which they can articulate in the chat. Okay, so can Airtable change file domains from Word to JPEG? I don't know exactly what that means, but I don't know what that means. Liza, please clarify in the chat. Kenny asks, can date queries use functions to query by month, year, or should separate columns be defined for that? When you say use functions, do you mean on the spreadsheet or a filter? You can add multiple. So if we were going for dates, you can add multiple filters at a time. And so if you wanted to say, if your purpose here is to filter and only see, things that happened in May and things that happened in June, you could do that by adding and filters to it. So you could say, and this date is within, or actually rather, is before, is after, is before, is after, and you could just do lots and lots of them. If the question is about reporting, there's a whole other, and I didn't even get into it. I had configured a few of these, but there's a whole other universe of reporting features that allow you to do things like grouping. So if you wanted to do reports where you could group by month, you can 100% do that once you start getting into these like chart settings, where you can group by buckets, and the buckets are related to, if it's a date, it'll help you group by months and stuff like that. Spatial query functions, not a lot on the spatial side. One thing, so Airtable has these apps. One of the apps is a mapping app. So kind of the most sophisticated integration in the Airtable related to mapping, like kind of that's pre-built, is this map app, which basically you give it your Google API key, and it will turn your address field into a geocache field and put it on a map. And you can do like basic configuration to display, to change how that map looks. However, it's like it operates like a SQL database. And so with third-party, using building apps, you can use it to hold geospatial information and run that data through Mapbox or Cardo or a custom application quite easily. And I've done this a number of times to make kind of to make pretty impressive apps, doing polygons, all that stuff. So it's not a geospatial tool, but it can hold data that access through the API. Speaking of the API is here. If you go to help and API documentation, then this is your automatically generated. API docs, and it's pretty cool. That's what you can give to a developer who can then like do all types of stuff with it. Although, yeah, here we go. So if you want to see fields, seems like you know, if you want to see example responses, whatever, it tells you all types of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with Airtable, you know, through the API that is less, you can't do as easily through the interface. Okay, when next, 7.4, I don't know what that means. For restrictions, can restrictions be placed on people you share with so they can only view or update certain tables or columns? Great question. And this leads to one of the things where that Airtable does not do, which is Airtable is not an editable data portal. And so a lot of my work is using Airtable as a database, but then creating apps on top of it to manage, to turn it into like a directory style application where, you know, a user can only edit their records and can't edit other people's records. So if I go into the sharing zone of Airtable, which is here, and so I can share like my workspace, which is all my Airtables under a group, or I can share my base, which is usually what happens. You know, I can invite people by email to collaborate on the Airtable, and I can assign them the permissions. Those permissions are, you know, basically creator, which means they can edit anything, including the data structure. Editor, which means they can edit any content, but not the data structure. Commenter, where they can only add comments in those chat logs, and read only, which is read only. But I cannot say this user can only manage information about, you know, in 2019 or information connected to DDC. I can't do stuff like that. Can't do stuff like that. And so that's where custom apps really come in. Okay, so when it comes to defining precinct boundaries, so like, can Airtable change file extensions? I don't think so. I mean, if Airtable is changing file extensions, you can, you know, it has some regex functionality, and it allows you to do like, you could say on this column, I want to change everything that says .docx to .jpeg or something like that. You know, you could do that. You could also do that in a spreadsheet in the same way. There isn't a native mechanism for like reform, you know, changing data formats. When it comes to defining precinct boundaries and showing violations, okay, so, you know, what Airtable can do is it can handle stuff like creating a text field that is, you know, a polygon, and, or actually, I guess if we wanted to say something like precinct, create a new table called precincts, and then on this new table, on this precincts table, on this precincts table, say, okay, we're going to create a polygon field, and then here, you know, basically paste polygon coordinates. Then it would be easy for an app to pull the data out and display it. Okay, I can see that we've got a lot of still questions coming in. Can I create that allows individuals with access to upload documents? Okay, so if you wanted to do individuals with access uploading documents, you could create a form and they could upload documents. You could limit that form to people who have certain emails. But yeah, once it, you know, let me move into the next bit of the presentation, because it basically, the type of questions a lot of you are asking are basically like, how do you make this into an intranet? How do you make this into a portal where work gets done? That's where like building custom apps on top of Airtable is really so useful. So moving back into the, you know, feel free to keep posting stuff here. I'm just trying to be mindful of time. I mean, I can go over on time, but I don't know if other people can. So let me take us back to this scenario where like you have a spreadsheet where you're organizing information about something that's important. So, you know, your spreadsheet is probably like dead. people usually are only managing live spreadsheets where data is actually coming in and fresh, you know, a few, maybe one or two at a time. You know, spreadsheets tend to be used for reporting. They tend to be extractions from other systems, or they're used quickly to solve a problem and then are kind of left to die. So your spreadsheet's probably dead, and it's probably in a spreadsheet graveyard, which is what your computer is. And that's because your spreadsheet, if your spreadsheet isn't connected to other data sets, people aren't going to invest time in keeping it up to date. And so, yeah, and if you're in government and you're not even using Google Sheets or collaborative spreadsheets, then this is even more true, and your inbox is filled with dead spreadsheets as well, not just your computer file system or your Google Drive. And so just to kind of contextualize what the next bit here, you know, our job in general as information managers is to structure information so that it can act as knowledge. And sometimes I think we get caught up in this world of data, but you know, data is, in my opinion, data is information trying to become knowledge. It's structured information on its way to being knowledge, but data itself is, you know, needs work to be put into it to become kind of insights and knowledge that people really want. And so what these DIY databases, what these spread bases allow you to do is basically create connected data sets that, you know, that can sustain themselves, that deliver enough value to make people want to update them and sustain them and become part of your internal information operations system. So depending on what you're doing, you know, you can make any type of database with this stuff. And so whether it's, you know, requesting vacation time, or it's tracking building violations, or whatever it is, you know, you don't have to send out spreadsheets for that type of thing. You can make a database with it. And so because of that, it's worth looking at your spreadsheets and thinking to yourself, okay, you know, what is the implicit data model in the spreadsheet, or not even in the spreadsheet? Maybe it's a document that's kind of got data embedded in it and stuff like that. You know, what is your implicit data model? And that usually is the top row of your spreadsheet. And then how does the top row of that spreadsheet connect to other top rows of other spreadsheets, either within that collection of spreadsheets or, you know, other spreadsheets that exist around, you know, around your organization? How can those things be connected to turn them into a information resource that is persistent and useful? And so thinking about your spreadsheets as these data models trying to get out, and that those spreadsheets, you know, that those data models basically emerge organically within organizations, and they kind of operate kind of like these paths, the footpaths at the university, where, you know, people are structuring data over and over again in relatively similar ways. You know, it's the data models trying to get out, and it's worth embedding in a database. And so if in your organization you start connecting these data models together using a spread base, using Airtable or something like that, you're gonna see that you're likely creating a CRM or an ERP or some other recognizable enterprise software system over time, as that information gets like increasingly managed. And so this is an ERD diagram on the right that Airtable automatically generates of a pretty complicated base, but that's where a lot of these systems want to go, and they want to go there. Them going there is a lot about like power and stuff. So, you know, a living data model that is accurately representing operations of your organization, you know, is a powerful element of your organization, and it's the type of element that in the past was only used for, you know, the only people who could really edit that data model, of the model for how knowledge works within your organization, was your organization's leadership, basically the people who cut the checks and the developers who implement stuff. And if you're working in a heavily vendored environment where like vendors, you're using a lot of third-party systems to manage information about your organization, then, you know, unless you're a decision maker and you're signing the contracts, or you're kind of controlling the specification at a very detailed level that the vendors are implementing, you don't have power to change, to basically influence your organization's knowledge model and how your organization operates. So a lot of times when I deploy Airtable for organizations, you know, for one little bit of a project, the people who I'm deploying it with get really excited because they're like, oh, wow, this thing could also do this, and it could replace that tool that, you know, is 10 years old, and that tool, which we never liked. And they start getting, you know, they start getting excited, and then a higher up at the organization will be like, will either be like, oh, actually this Airtable thing is a bad idea because it's too empowering to the front line, or they'll, you know, be like, you know, focus, 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 which, you know, I also agree, focusing is a good idea when it comes to these types of systems, because if not, you'll start modeling all types of stuff. But okay, so that's a little bit on kind of like what you can expect if you start using Airtable within an organization that hasn't been exposed to it, to do things, to organize information that has in the past been managed through spreadsheets. So if you're going to, now the bit that you know, how do we use Airtable to then like develop software better? And so I'm going to kind of go through the process I use for that, which is like, okay, we're making a specification and you know, leveraging Airtable to do that. So what I alluded to in this previous your data model, if you're working with a group of other people, your data model might be contained within their spreadsheets or documents. But basically, you've got to organize their data model. You've got to organize that information that currently exists that's already being used into into basically a collection of spreadsheets. Basically, collect all your spreadsheets and docs that you find relevant, build them out into Airtable, and, you know, connect, basically analyze them, connect them. So basically, organize the information that has come to you, and then connect it up in the data model using Airtable. I like a kitchen sink approach where you basically, if you're working with like a bunch of different spreadsheets, kind of put everything in there, connect everything up, and then whittle it down over time. And so we did this for some community boards building Airtables for their operations, you know, and they had a lot of documentation, you know, a lot of spreadsheets and docs. They wanted to see all of that information in the data model. They wanted to see all that information in the data model before we started deleting fields that might not be necessary. So it's a good way to work with users to kind of put everything in there first and then whittle it down afterwards. And so in this context, in the context of an Airtable that you've been whittling things down for, or, you know, that you've built, you know, it's going to become operational basically as soon as that data goes in. And so your Airtable is your CRM or it's your ERP. As soon as that data is in there, you know, it's basically live data. And so it's great to get people to use that data as quickly as possible, so that you know, they get the experience of the use of the system and they stop using whatever hodgepodge of spreadsheets and email and other information management systems that they've been using to keep that knowledge organized. And so, you know, and as you go through that experience, you can see that you know, which fields are useful, which fields aren't useful, and you can really optimize that the data model. So, you know, and because of Airtable's natural flexibility, where it's easy for people to add fields and edit fields, you know, in that first phase of use, people might change things up a bit, and you just got to keep an eye. You know, and that's great. You know, that's basically you optimizing the data model to figure out what it is you really want to be managing here. So once you have that optimized data model, ideally you've got this optimized data model for your app or for whatever it is that you're building, your data system in Airtable. You know, you've used it, it's gotten pretty sharp, and then you're ready at that point to move into like building an app with it. And so anyone who's, you know, app building, there's a lot of mystery around it, but really it's data model plus layout, boxes, maybe with a few interactions, and you're done. So if you already have your data organized in Airtable, you've already got your database, the database bit figured out. then it's time to, yeah, start wireframing things up. I like to use Google Slides, and you basically just start adding your figure out your basic layout, and then just start adding your field names, table names. Basically add, the description of showing what field you want to appear where, and then your wireframes are going to quickly go from kind of boxes on the screen to something that you can imagine being the actual app that you want. And it's with this level of specificity necessary to send to a developer for them to implement, or for someone on your team to implement exactly what you're talking about, including like the order of which fields, what data is in that field, what's the order, what's the order of the fields, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And so this really is it. Like, lay it out, add the field names, and then start collaging. And so in this example, we're kind of building Yelp, but I take screenshots and make collages. You can take screenshots of your data in Airtable using the different views, like this right here under number 1 is a gallery view, a screenshot of a gallery view of Airtable. But you can also take screenshots of other elements that exist on the internet, and just kind of make that collage. You have your field names already together, and so by collaging it up, you're really explaining, you're showing an example of what the thing should look like to the people who are going to implement your software. Another thing that a lot of people aren't aware of are that there are thousands of pre-built design templates out there on the internet that could cost 20 or $30, and you can take screenshots from those. That's great. But you can also buy those, and then those are your working components for assembling your app. And like I say all the time, very rarely are people building interactions or using, need to create new components. People have been doing this internet web app thing for 20 plus years. Things are built well, and things are built cheaply, and you can assemble components together. Your data model is often your most custom part. Assembling components together using design patterns like Bootstrap or Material. Also, the federal government has a great design pattern, federal design system that can be used. Don't get too, no reason to get too creative with it. So then once you have your collage, you have your fields documented, your collage, then the next step, and really kind of the final step for pushing this all into development, is sharing this Airtable API key with your developer, or if you are the developer, to get that Airtable API key, and then that's your model, and that's your live data, and then it's time to just get to work building the thing. And what I like, what often happens in my experience, in my process, is things get coded up kind of quick and dirty from the perspective of like, okay, the layout gets done, and then it's a process of QAing by taking screenshots and explaining what's wrong with the screenshot, or adding more collage bits. Basically collaging your screenshots until the app that you're collaging is the same as the app that you're developing. And so I wish I were better at Zoom, because then I would kind of try to conduct a bit of conversation here. But so to review kind of where we've gone, hopefully, is that we took some spreadsheets, we took some data resources, we created a working data model, integrated them together into an Airtable to create a working data model. People started using it within either you or within your organization to test it out and check, maybe actually operationally use it for goals within the organization, or as a specification for a custom app. Then we wireframed the app, placing the fields kind of where we want them. We added a collage layer to show, what kind of components, what kind of design elements we want to see, to use for the app. And we delivered that plus the Airtable with the API to a developer who can then go and basically implement the app as specified. And then what we're going to do is we're going to receive that app back, receive the results of that work, and then we're going to take screenshots and highlight, take screenshots and identify like issues where things need to change to get to a point of launch. And the whole point of this process is to deliver to the developer or to your software team, whatever, something that gives them the least amount of questions possible. They have the fewest questions possible about what needs to get built, and something that you can share with your team, with decision makers, that's 100% legible to them too. And that's really the key to all of this, which is how do you make it possible for your users and your decision makers to understand exactly what's going to get built and get feedback from them as easily as possible. Using Google Sheets, Google Slides for this, is a very comfortable tool, or basically a spreadsheet, a presentation tool. You can add comments in line. You can right-click to get. You can right-click comments. People can have comments, right in here. Slides are a lingua franca of the organizational universe. So it's easy for you to have conversations about slides. APIs and the API documentation of the data model is kind of the lingua franca of the software development universe, so that people know exactly what fields need to go where. Bringing those two things together using these like absolutely least common denominator tools is just a great way to get stuff built and to have people feel heard during that process, and to get the best ideas out of your team. And make everybody as happy as possible during that process. And that's basically what I do for a living. And I think it's also something that, like I said before, the people who hold the keys to the custom applications, or really the keys to the databases, to the knowledge models, the ability to change process within your organization, those are the people who are structuring your data systems. And so if you're finding that your organization isn't responsive to the needs of its staff, isn't responsive to the needs of like the public or its clients, its customers, because of outdated process, one way to changing that process is to change the data system that frames that process, that collects that information, and prototyping better ways to collect that information, better processes to apply. So what these Airtables and these spread bases do, and what custom app development allows you to do, is to prototype different ways of doing things and say, like, this is actually a working example, or like, this is actually a working system for how we could do things differently, or how we could do things better. Dare I say that, that type of prototyping of solutions, if the government, if New York City government if that were a culture within New York City government, New York City staff had those tools, a lot of the issues that come up around COVID or whatever, vaccine sites and blah, 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 like a fracturing of information resources, everybody sending spreadsheets to different, I'm sure many spreadsheets were sent, very few, there weren't enough shared information resources within government to manage these situations. If it were possible to put up an Airtable, put up a flexible information resource that gained enough steam to make people want to edit that information, as opposed to edit the information, as opposed to keep doing what they were doing, then I think things can work a lot better. And that's where these databases and these spread bases become part of a government reform agenda. Frontline workers able to structure their own systems, and prototype better ways of doing things, or putting their own systems together and showing working examples to each other and their boss, means that we can get things done faster, better, and cheaper, which I think is what government needs to do. So I'm here to help with that stuff. I mean, I work with government. Haven't done an Airtable project. Actually, yeah, I've done government and Airtable together in New York City before. Would love to do more of it. I'm also, I work as a for-profit and also nonprofit capacity through the WeGov NYC program, And that's a program to kind of do things, try to help government employees in New York City do things, empower them with tools and techniques to get things done better. So we've got a newsletter. You can learn more at WeGov NYC. I'm also here to help. You've all, I'm sure, got my contact info, but I'm Devin at Serapis is a good email. I'm on Twitter. And I write articles for Gotham Gazette. So you can find articles. I also have a website, devinbalkine.com, where you can find my Gotham Gazette articles. And last thing I'll do is I'll just promote a tool that we're going to do a Thursday session at 6 about the WeGov NYC data book. And what this tool, it's kind of a tool in a tool chain, but basically we're taking New York City open data and other data sources. We're normalizing it for, agency name is our first bit, where we've taken, over a dozen data sets, normalized the agency name, and then built a kind of an agency profile interface so you can see people that work at an agency, their budget, their expense budget line items, their capital projects. It's going towards a comprehensive view of agency data in a much more, in a familiar interface, and that requires normalizing data. So we can go to, with open data that isn't normalized means that only people who who are data analysts or who can pay data analysts are really going to get the value out of it. So we're going to talk about that tool. But we're also going to talk about that tool within the context of a discussion around how could NYC open data, if it were normalized, be much more useful. Normalizing data is not rocket science, but it does require some time and effort. So we have a little bit of tooling to make normalizing data easier that we use internally that we can share. We're going to show what it means, an example of what it means after we've normalized, what we can build when we've normalized 15-ish data sets. And over the next year, we're going to be normalizing a lot more data sets. Like I said, we normalized around agencies, but we're also going to normalize around things like NTAs, neighborhood names, and other stuff that just isn't standardized around the city in terms of how it's articulated in the open data. So if no one has any questions, then we'll call it a day. I appreciate your time. I hope this was useful, and thanks a lot.